Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Team Tuesday this week with Lucia Alarcon. Hi, Lucia. Welcome back.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everybody.
So, Lucia, on Tuesdays, we talk about teams and how sometimes they create their own problems. But before we dive into that, share with us, what was the book that most influenced you in your career as a Scrum Master?
It is one of the classics of all times. Is the book of Lyssa Adkins, Coaching Agile Teams. It's quite a classic, and I was lucky enough to read it quite early in my career. But it was something that I revisited over time as well, because it has a lot of really gold nuggets that you can appreciate in its deeper meaning once you've got also a bit of experience as a Scrum Master. So that's definitely one. Another book that I could definitely suggest Scrum Masters to read, because I think it's a very interesting read. It's called Flow. It's by an author called Mihaly, and he has a really difficult surname, but it's Flow, the experience of the psychology of optimal experience. And it's very interesting because it talks a lot about motivation and how to get into that space in which you are engaged with the work that you're doing. You know, like you feel that time is not passing by, you're engaged, you're motivated, and you're achieving that flow. So it's a really nice book, and it's great to understand how to recreate the environment for that to perhaps happen more often with teams, you know, to get people more engaged and motivated. So it's really good.
Absolutely. And I can't pronounce Mihaly's name either, the author of Flow. It's a very difficult name, but I'll put the link on the show notes so that it's easy to find and people can dive in and learn more about it. Those are great recommendations, of course. Lyssa's book has been regularly featured here also on the podcast, and a lot of people find it inspiring and also, as you said, great even when you have a lot of experience. So it's not just a getting started book, it's a getting started book, but it also yields value later on when you've collected more experience. So, Lucia, now we turn our attention to teams. And after all, they are the ones we work with day in, day out. But it's not always easy, because sometimes the teams themselves start creating like this, behaviors and patterns that kind of spiral out of control and eventually lead to problems. So we want you to tell us one of those stories, a story of a team that you work with. Tell us a little bit about the context, big project, small project, whatever that context is. And then walk us through, the small steps, the little things that started to indicate that something was going wrong. We'll dive into the details later on, but tell us that story.
So the experience that comes to mind, I was part of a team. It was a really great team, very capable individuals, genuinely nice people, a lot of talent in the team, and a lot of commitment to the work that we were doing. But as the years went by, I witnessed the team falling a bit into an unhealthy space, and even having many of the team members struggling with mental health.
Well, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, what do you say, like, falling into this unhealthy space? What were the behaviors, the things that you were seeing that kind of helped you to get to that conclusion?
As I was part of the team, it wasn't quite evident as the situation was, like unraveling. But at some point, I started noticing people getting more and more disconnected from each other and working in parallel without communicating. So there was double ups on work. There were people kind of like inadvertently going in different directions. And when I started piecing up together different things, I realized that what had been happening was that this team had a manager. And this manager, eventually, I realized this manager had a bit of a pattern of working with the team And the pattern that I observed is that the manager would have separate conversations with each team member. And in each conversation, the manager would suggest the team member to own a specific initiative. And I think there was something about the way they would talk to the team members that positioned the situation as, this is your chance to shine. Take this initiative and own it. So I think what was, unfortunately being fostered there was a bit of an environment of secrecy and individualism, and trying to kind of like hit a bit the fame by leading this initiative on your own. So I observed this behavior happening, and team members being kind of like led to directions quite on their own. And also what happened as well is that the manager would at some point come back and say, this needs to be redone. It's not correct. It's completely. So there was a bit of an unproductive situation of I'm leaving you alone and not giving you direction. And when I come back, I need to redo everything again. So it was quite, it wasn't a very productive environment, really. It was pretty difficult.
This story kind of illustrates a point that we don't often talk about here on the podcast, but there are many things that can cause dramatic change in a team without the team even noticing it. And the change can actually happen pretty quickly and with very little effort. And you just gave a great example or great illustration of that, which is the manager having one-on-one conversations, using their hierarchical superiority to motivate people, giving them secret assignments and making them start to doubt each other, right? Like almost as if, wait a minute, he gave me this assignment. I can't tell anyone because he didn't tell me that I should talk with other team members. So I have to do it on my own, and kind of putting pressure and responsibility on the team members' shoulders, but at the same time telling them don't talk to anyone implicitly, I imagine. This kind of illustrates how change is so easy to bring to a team if you just take the right approach, right? If you find the right lever. In this case, it's a negative change. It's a destructive change. But one person alone, without talking to anyone, was able to do that on a team that was working well before.
Yeah. So I'm 100% sure it wasn't the intention of this manager to generate this secrecy environment. I think it was mostly as a byproduct of perhaps the lack of, as a manager, bringing people together and share the information on forums where the team could hear about each other's work and what they needed to do and how they could collaborate, and bring in skills as connecting people. That was missing, and it made every team member quite isolated. I think the key point for me in the story is that, again, reflecting over time, I realized that this manager had a very much of a command and control type of style. And I even remember an anecdote that for me I will never forget. There was a moment in time in which the team had a workshop with this manager. And in the workshop, we were using Post-it to post ideas about what we could be doing and how we could be working together. And I've put a Post-it up talking about we need more collaboration. And when we were kind of like doing a recap of the different Post-its, I found the Post-it of the manager next to my Post-it. And in what this person had written down in that Post-it was like, we don't need collaboration, we need coordination. So it kind of like was such a representation, a good representation of what this person was kind of like, you're right in the sense of certain profiles, perhaps due to stereotypes or standards, they tend to think that their place as managers is very much of a command and control type of place, a coordination type of situation, They would see collaboration as a hindrance. they would see collaboration as this is going to slow us down. We don't need to collaborate. We need to coordinate, So that was kind of like quite a good symbolic a phrase that I will never forget, that made me realize how this person, like perhaps saw teamwork, right?
Or the lack of. So I really like that story, and I'm grateful that you shared the story of that Post-it, because it is, as you said, very illustrative of a mindset. And the mindset is, if I just tell you the right things, everything will go fine, which is a little bit what you were talking about. The pressure is on project managers, as we discussed it yesterday, right? Like, if you just tell people what to do and you're right, then everything will go fine. And of course, this comes from the perspective and the assumption that everything can be known up front. But obviously, when we start doing the work, things happen that nobody knew. So it's impossible to coordinate up front with perfect accuracy, right? There's always going to be problems. And then the next thing is, okay, so but how do we solve that? How do we solve the imperfect coordination? Well, the answer is collaboration, of course. For us, Scrum Masters and Agilists out there, we know the answer to failed coordination is collaboration. But as you said, this person thought that collaboration was actually the opposite. It was a hindrance to coordination.
Yeah. But, like everyone is at different journeys and different points in life with different interests. So maybe that manager wasn't the right manager for that team or that environment. Maybe for another type of environment or another type of team could have been amazing in a different, way. So
yeah, that's a good point. That when things go wrong, it's not because necessarily people are evil or ignorant. It's just that the tools we are using don't apply to the current context. And which is why this podcast is called the Toolbox, right? Because we need to have a lot of tools in our toolbox, because contexts are different, and we will need to reach in and take another tool when the previous one doesn't work.
Yeah, definitely. And it's I've heard that there's out there's phrases that refer to when there's a dysfunction, you're never meant to blame it on a person. It's on the system, so if you take this person out of that system, place, or process, and you put it in another system, place, or process, perhaps that person is just absolutely grateful that it's not necessarily the right person for this other one here, so it's never the person the problem. It's always the system that has put them there.
Absolutely. And that's a great reminder for us Scrum Masters. Thank you very much for sharing that, Lucia.
No worries.
Tuesday is Team Day here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast. But tomorrow we talk about something that goes beyond the work we do with the teams. We will talk about how to lead change and what our guests have learned from leading and participating in change programs during their career. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.